Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to talk about ultra micro baits. And by that, basically what I'm talking about are baits that most anglers would consider panfish baits, the baits that you're catching crappie, perch, and bluegill on. But what a lot of people don't recognize is the fact that these ultra micro baits catch a ton of big bass. It doesn't matter the species, your largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, all eat these micro baits. In fact, in my opinion, it's really hard for them to turn it down. The hardest part about fishing an ultra micro bait is the angler has to be able to get it in front of the fish, and that's the hard part. Sometimes we're talking about baits that are so small that the presentations are rather limited, and therefore you can't get the baits to where the fish are at, especially if you're dealing with bad conditions in the terms of Mother Nature. If you've got a lot of wind, if you're trying to fish deep, it's really tough to get these ultra micro baits down deep. But I will tell you right now, if you pay attention to some of the baits that are coming out from iCast at the moment, it's really impressive the number of really small baits that are being produced specifically for the bass world. And it's because these baits work. You know, years ago, I read an article in the In Fisherman magazine where Al Lindner basically mentioned the fact that if you put a peanut in front of a person, they'll probably eat it. If you put a cheeseburger in front of a person and they just ate lunch, they may not eat it. Well, an ultra micro bait is the same as a peanut in front of a fish versus presenting them with a full-size swim bait. So there's really no wrong time to be throwing a ultra micro bait. So I've got here my 5 favorite ultra micro baits at the moment. These are ones that are baits that I have caught a ton of fish on. They're baits that I've been playing around with quite a bit. And it's really actually somewhat difficult to find really small baits that on the market. They can be hard to purchase. A lot of normal tackle outlets, if you go to your normal tackle shops, a lot of times they don't carry them because they specifically are made for panfish. And if you go to a tackle shop that's geared towards bass fishing, they may not have it there. You know, some of this stuff is probably a tackle warehouse. Some of this stuff may not be a tackle warehouse. Some of these baits are specifically sold to pan fishermen, and therefore you need to find where they're purchasing it. I will put the links in the video description if Tackle Warehouse covers them. I don't actually know if they do. But anyways, guys, so I want to get into these. I also do want to remind you that if you're looking for some additional content from me, please check out my membership details. If you go to my homepage, you can find the join button. Click the join button. It'll give you all the details about the different levels of membership, the ability to get additional videos, monthly live streams, as well as my own personal contact to answer your very own questions. So check that out. And that's really important for some of this, because if you're talking about ultra micro finesse presentations, a lot of times people don't have the experience with it. You know, it's almost like intimidating in the reverse factor of throwing a really large bait. A lot of people don't want to throw big glide baits because they're intimidating. Well, a lot of people don't want to throw ultra micro baits because they're kind of intimidating too. You can't cast them as far as you normally would. You can't put them in front of the fish. But I can assure you, if you do spend the time to learn how to put these small baits in front of bass, they will eat them up like they're candy in front of my 2 little boys. You put candy in front of them and they go crazy the same way a bass will go crazy for these. So let's get into it. You know, first off, I want to talk about presentation. There's really 2 good presentations in my mind for these baits. So before I get into the actual baits themselves, just know that they all work on a drop shot. So a drop shot's a really good way to take these tiny little baits and get them far away from the boat. The other best presentation, in my opinion, are small jig heads. You know, a small jig head like this Brush Easy by Hayabusa. This is a 13th ounce, but it's a size 1 hook. So it's a really small hook. These actually have a brush guard, which make them good if you're fishing around any sort of cover or timber. And a lot of these baits work really well around standing timber, which is one reason I like this Brush Easy Weed Guard by Hayabusa. The other one that I like to use is just the Z-Man Finesse Shrooms hook. Again, this is, I believe, a size 1 hook as well. They come in really lightweight, so you can get them all the way up to a 20th of an ounce, which for a normal bait, a 20th of an ounce isn't all that heavy. But for a small ultra micro bait, a 20th of an ounce will work just fine. Again, you're basically talking about what most people would consider a crappie bait. All right, so let's get into these, because some of these are crappie baits. They're marketed towards crappie fishermen, but they catch bass. So the first one I want to talk about here is this little guy. This is a 2-inch Yamamoto Yamaminnow. Right here, it's a 2-inch. It's just basically their same drop shot minnow that they've had out for years, but this is a 2-inch model, and it works phenomenally well on a drop shot. This is one of those baits that if you put in front of bass, they have a hard time turning it down. It's a great little bait, and one I've been catching a ton of bass on for years. And they're actually really difficult to find. That's one bait that is geared specifically towards panfish. They actually show on the package crappie and panfish. No mention of bass anywhere. They've got crappie, bluegill, and yellow perch on the package. They catch a lot of bass too, let me tell you that. The next up, we've got here one that I have talked about on the channel before. This is specifically the Little Spider by Kitech. This is the 2-inch Little Spider. This is one that I really do like to put on that Brush Easy weed guard or hook, because it's got the weed guard. But this Little Spider is dynamite. This is something that anytime you've got a crayfish hatch going on, and I've shown pictures before, if there's a crayfish hatch going on, you'll have these tiny little crayfish all over. This is the single best bait that I know to mimic that. Because when that little crayfish hatch is going on, everywhere you go, there's little tiny crayfish. And the bass are keyed in so specifically on that size that this bait dominates during that time. This is one that, again, I've talked about it on the channel before. This bait was out for a while, it got discontinued, and then they brought it back because the demand was so high. Packs of these, when they were a little bit different material, but packs of these were going for like $100 a pack on the secondary market because people knew that they worked that well. So that's one that works great. Another one is the Gamakatsu. This is a relatively new bait. This is a 3-inch sandworm that Gamakatsu has come out with. The cool thing with these, and this has been a great drop shot worm for me for smallmouth in the North Country. One thing I really like is it's similar to the Z-Man Elastic. It's a very, very stretchy, strong material. But they've got like built-in scent into this too. I don't specifically know what the scent is, but I can tell you that this little guy on a drop shot, it's so thin and narrow that it really looks like a leech in the water, and it's hard for the fish to turn down. And this is a little bit big for ultra micro baits because it's a 3-inch bait, but the reality here is it's so thin, so lightweight that it really fits into that micro category. But it's a bait that's been really catching a lot of fish for me on a drop shot specifically. Another good drop shot bait is this little guy right here. This is the Paddle Fry by Jenko. This is one that I found a while ago on Tackle Warehouse, just kind of fooling around. So what caught my eye with this is one reason I really like it. So up here in the North Country, we get a lot of tadpole hatches. So every year, usually what you're talking about is like the few weeks from Memorial Day into June, there are some lakes that I go to that will be covered in tadpoles. And not only are largemouth gorging themselves on them, smallmouth are as well. And this bait specifically has been really good for me on a drop shot. It really kind of looks like a little tadpole. It's worked really well. I also think on the Great Lakes, it looks kind of like a goby. It's got that goby look. But it's been one that's caught a ton of fish for me. So I've been really, really pleased with it. I've been playing around with it for about basically since the beginning of this year. And it's been one that's great. And this whole micro bait category has been something that I have truly loved over the last probably 5 or 6 years. I have found up here in the North Country, specifically for smallmouth, it's something that I have really utilized to be extremely productive, but I have found when I go down south for largemouth and spotted bass, it's every bit as productive. And that's what's so cool about it. These baits are starting to be made and geared specifically towards bass fishing, because 5 years ago, people would have looked at you and said, "You're nuts. You're throwing a crappie bait. Why are you throwing a little crappie tube for bass?" Well, it's because they work. The bass love them every bit as much as the panfish. So the last bit I want to talk about is this is the Little Trooper. This is the Berkley Max Scent Little Trooper. This is one that they came out with, I'm going to say last year at ICAST. This is a little 2-inch crawbait. This little guy has been absolutely fantastic for me. Again, I put this on a small jig head. You put this on like the 20th ounce Z-Man, that little shrooms I was talking about. This guy, it fits perfect. That head fits perfect right in here. And you can get this bait into areas where the crawfish live. You can get it a little deeper if you need to, and it generates an absolute ton of bites. And when I'm saying a ton of bites, guys, I'm talking about you could potentially catch 4 or 5 fish to every one that a traditional bait catches. Now, the caveat to this is a lot of those fish may be that big or that big, 12 inches or smaller. But I'll tell you what, they catch 4-pounders just as easily as they catch 12 inchers. And the reality is, when I take my 2 little boys out, they're catching a pile of fish because of these little baits. If I gave them a traditional bass bait, they wouldn't be catching bass. And at the same time, they do occasionally catch a rock bass, a perch, a bluegill, a crappie, which keeps them in the game. But I can assure you guys, all of these baits, every bit as much as they're catching fish with them, I'm catching fish in national level, professional level tournaments. So don't think that an ultra micro bait is not made for tournaments. These baits will put you, these baits will put you on the fish and get you into those situations where you're not worried about catching limits because you're catching so many fish on them. So guys, check them out. If you haven't played around with really small baits, I recommend that you do, because I think you'll find that you can have an absolute blast and catch a pile of fish. That's all I'm going to say. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And stay tuned. We'll have another video tomorrow.